What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I wanted to make a video covering some of the areas of Battlefield 2042 that I personally think need to be fixed heading into the launch of the game after we got our hands on a small portion of the game in the 2042 beta. Now keep in mind when I say these need to be changed before launch, I'm not one of those people that just finds outrage in every situation and thinks if these things don't change then the game will be a bust or it'll completely die off or something. I more just think that these are areas where the game can definitely improve, and so I'd love to see these be worked on before launch or even in the few months after the game has launched, but by no means do I think these are do or die. Before we get into it, if you guys are new to the channel, then consider subscribing and turning on those notifications. But with that being said, let's get stuck right into it. So the first thing that I think DICE need to really work on before launch or closely thereafter is a pretty obvious one, and this one is the bugs. Obviously the beta was fairly buggy, and that is to be expected. Of course, I've never played a single beta before that wasn't full of bugs, but either way, that is something that they definitely need to try and stamp out before the game launches, or like I said, at least in the weeks and months after launch. DICE do have a pretty poor track record, unfortunately, when it comes to launching their games. We've seen Battlefield 4, Battlefront 2 and Battlefield 5 all launch in a very buggy state, and although bugs are to be expected at the launch of any game because in reality they are just inevitable, it's more so about just reducing the amount of bugs rather than removing them altogether. There absolutely will be bugs at launch. There are bugs at launch of essentially any game that has ever been released, but I think people tend to have their own sort of threshold for what is acceptable and what isn't, and I think for most people a few bugs here and there is acceptable, but if the game launches in a state that we saw it in the beta, then I dare say there will be some absolute outrage from the community, and to be honest, rightly so. Now the good news is that the beta build was a few months old, so many of the bugs that we saw had actually already been fixed by the time we were playing. They just hadn't been fixed in that build of the game, and then even since the beta they have already confirmed that many of the bugs have either A, been fixed already since then, or B, they've taken note and should be able to fix many of them quite easily, and so I am confident that many of those bugs will be gone by the full release, but we obviously just have to wait and see how many bugs there are when it actually launches, so that is definitely one thing that I'll be keeping a close eye on. Now another thing that I think they really need to improve, which does come into the same realm as the bugs, is the optimization of the game. Luckily on my end I never really ran into too many issues in the beta. I was on the Series X most of the time and it ran pretty smoothly the entire time, and then even on PC and PS4 I never really ran into too many issues with dropping frames or anything like that. It happened maybe 5 to 10 times throughout my entire 30 or so hours, and considering it's a beta, that is actually not too bad at all. My experience aside though, I saw a heap of complaints all over social media about the poor optimization, and so obviously a lot of other people out there weren't having quite the luck that I was, having performance issues in terms of dropped frames, crashes, screen tearing and all that kind of thing, and so from what I can tell the game wasn't all that well optimized in the beta. Just like the bugs, the optimization is likely already much better in the current build of the game, and I'm sure that they will want to improve that even further after some of the feedback from the beta. So I do feel confident yet again that the game will run much better when it actually launches, but again we really can only judge from what we've played so far, and so that was definitely an area that I think they do need to get right, as a poor performing game is not something that anyone is going to enjoy if it stays like that for months on end. Moving on, something else that I hope they improve upon is certain elements of the HUD. Now the static part of the HUD, as in like the minimap, your weapon and ammo and all those areas of the HUD, look absolutely great in my opinion. I think it looks super clean and I have absolutely no issues at all with that part of the HUD. My issues were with the spatial UI, meaning elements of the HUD that are essentially attached to something within the map, like a flag marker or the icon above friendly vehicles, for example. In this clip you're watching now, you can see exactly what I mean, and I talked about this in a previous video, but I'm seeing way too much information on my screen right here. There are icons for like friendly drones and choppers, there are markers for each flag, even though I'm on the whole other side of the map, and yeah, there's just a lot going on here, none of which I really need to know about. That type of stuff is obviously fine when it's in your line of sight, or if it's within say 200 meters or something like that. I can definitely understand the usefulness of knowing that information when you're within range, but if I'm like 600 or 700 meters away, it's just irrelevant information unless maybe I can directly see it, and all it's doing is just clogging up my field of view. For example, if an enemy shows up and they're on that same section of my screen, I'm gonna have a pretty hard time seeing them, and that kind of thing can result in a death. Now I don't think it needs all that much work, honestly. I think it just needs to have like a lot more opacity, or like I said, it could just fade in when you get closer like it has in the past. I don't really have an issue with how it looks, just that it always seems to be there. So yeah, that's something that I hope they can fix, and considering the UI eye and the HUD are generally things that they tune up towards the end of development, like we've seen even just with the kill feed and the hit markers and stuff. I am confident it shouldn't be too hard for them to sort that out. Now, one last thing that I think they really could improve on was the sniping overall. It felt not so much weak, but I guess just kind of underwhelming for me, mostly because the bullet velocity felt super slow, and there is apparently bullet drag as well, which essentially slows the bullet down over a long range. And so yeah, I just feel like the snipers needed to feel a little bit more similar to how they did in Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5. In those games, it just felt like the weapon was really powerful and actually hitting like a truck without them feeling overpowered or anything like that, other than maybe the Martini Henry from Battlefield 1. But yeah, there was still a skill gap within the sniping of those games, and I honestly felt like they had some of, if not the best sniping in any shooter that I've ever played before. And so I really can't put my finger on it whether it was the velocity or the bullet drag, or even both, or maybe it was just the SWS-10 is the weakest sniper in the game or something. It's obviously pretty hard to tell as of right now, but I did just feel like they could use some work anyway. After playing more and more, I obviously got used to the velocity after a while anyway, so it's definitely something you can kind of adapt to. But again, it wasn't even that they felt like they were hard to use or anything like that. As you can see in some of the background clips, I ended up doing okay with the sniper. It just felt a little bit underwhelming and not quite as satisfying as it has in previous games. Sniping in Battlefield 1 and 5 really felt like the weapons were just super high powered rifles, whereas in 2042 the SWS-10 kind of felt no more powerful than the DM7, but maybe I've just been spoiled with how good the sniping was in those older games. Other than that, I think the specialist system obviously could use a bit of a change up as well, but I've talked about that more than enough in the last week or so, and on top of that, DICE have actually been surveying people about the specialist system and whether or not they liked it, and then we're meant to be hearing, or by the time this goes up we may have already heard, about the remaining specialists and also some news on what DICE learned in the beta, so there's some chance that maybe the specialists will be looked at anyway. If there's anything you guys think needs work on top of what I already mentioned, then feel free to leave a comment down below and let me know. If you guys enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. If you guys want to support the content that I make here on YouTube, then consider becoming a channel member. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.